Hey friends, thank you for joining me again here today. What you're getting here is an awful lot of glare. Hang on, maybe I can turn you the other way. We're still getting a little, this sun, that little bit of sun just broke through the clouds and trees over to my left just a few minutes ago. Okay, close enough. So I'm down to the last layers, as I said there. If you weren't watching, if you haven't been watching up to this point, I did 9 layers of acrylics, and since I last left you, I glazed the whole canvas, several different colors, then lifted off. Usually I call that 1 layer, it could almost be called 2. And then I did drawings with pencils. Again, for those of you who are new perhaps to my channel, it's a pencil made by Jerry's Artorama, and I think you're seeing that in reverse, right? Jet black, sorry about that. And I did so, then pencils, then drew with brushes, dark areas. That was 3 areas in oil layers. And then number 4, I did the fuzz layer. So the fuzz is already finished. Let me pick you up just for a second and show you what that fuzz looks like. See the orange that is escaping into the sky? See the blue that is escaping into the buildings? I did a bunch of fuzz up here in the blue, created really what traditionally could be called atmospheric perspective. And then the orange is just a mess. And then a bunch of green. So I basically did 3 layers of fuzz. There's my van faithfully waiting for me. And if you follow me fairly often, then you know what the fuzz. Now, I'm always evolving, of course, and I'm discovering now. I started the fuzz thing just over 2 years ago. Didn't know if it was going to be a permanent part of my repertoire or just a passing phase. It looks now like it's going to be permanent. And by the way, I won't do it, but I'll show you how I do it. I literally hold these brushes like this, way back at the ends, and I paint with 2 hands and I go like this. Really. I do that partly because if I slow down, I would run out of courage. I would get scared. Say, what are you doing? You're ruining it. But if I just make myself do it fast, I don't have time to think. More truth in that than you might imagine. While I'm talking, let me clean up a little bit. And what I'm discovering now, as the fuzz layer is not only hanging in there as a seems to be a permanent part of the technique, it's actually growing in importance and growing in acreage, growing in how much of the canvas gets covered. That means that, for my taste, too much of my earlier pencil layer gets obliterated. Now, for that to make sense, let me explain this again. If you follow me regularly, you've heard this. I use pencils for 2 reasons. One is they do, in fact, aid in similitude. They're, as everybody knows, pencils are great for drawing with. Duh. So I do use them for drawing. But, more important than that, I use them for texture. I don't need to do any more drawing on this painting. The drawing is more than adequate. But what I've lost with my fuzz layer is now I've lost too much of this delightful scritchy look. The reason I like the pencils, because they aid in similitude. They do help. Oh, I just realized I forgot to do some fuzz up there. I think it's all right. I'm going to leave it on that blue building, but they really do aid in similitude. But the main reason, like those last 2 strokes, there, that's not drawing. That is not a stroke. That is just okay. Do you know what I mean? That's not similitude. That's not in order to help me capture some realistic thing. That's just pure marks. Now those are hinting at, those particular marks right there hint at power lines that I see down there that I hadn't ever quite rendered until just that second. But most of what I'm doing right now is just creating a mess, creating texture, a little bit more energy, because I had more pencil, as you can imagine. I had more pencil showing here, but most of it got obliterated by the fuzz layer. Or not most, a lot of it, too much of it. So there, I'm probably done. That's enough. That is enough. I say that's enough, and then I do it a little more. Okay, on to the final layer. So this is, and certainly I will not broadcast my entire final edit layer. That would be a long broadcast. It is coming up on 4 o'clock. I started painting at close to 1, so I've got 3 hours into this painting. Let's do the final edit. Now, I used to call this final edit, still do sometimes, light, opaque highlights. So there's several factors there. Number one, it's all light values. So the painting is darker than I want it to be. No worry, it's going to come lighter as I do this last layer. Light, opaque, and of course that's redundant. If you're opaque, if it's not light, it's not opaque. If that doesn't make sense, keep watching me. I'll give you that lecture too. Not today though. Light, opaque, highlights. So this is sparkle time. This is detail time. This is correction, and this, of course, is the final edit. Now, there are 3 places I can start this final edit layer. The most traditional is paint like a traditional oil painter. Start with the furthermost object, which is the sky, and then move forward, or at least start with the sky. That's option number 1. Option number 2, start at the focal point and move out from there. This whole thing is a focal point, so I'm not sure what that would be. Number 3 is start with the lightest, brightest, whitest thing, and let me look at. I can't look at the scene. By the way, let me show you the scene again. You can see what it looks like now. It's really beautiful. Let me zoom into that so you can see how pretty that is. There, isn't that nice? But that is certainly not what I'm going to paint. Why? Because I'm going to paint what it looked like about 3.5 hours ago. Lucky for me, I did take a picture of it. I'll show you right here. So I have to be very careful about looking at that. I can look at it for architectural details, but I can't look at it for lighting. So there's the lighting, that is where the sun is coming from, where the light's coming from. That's what I've got to look at now. I'm going to set that phone right down there so I can glance at it. I've got a stool right there. If I get real, sit on a stool. So where to start? Focal point, light spot, or what is the light spot? According to this photograph, actually the lightest spot was the building way over here. And it can't be just a little white spot. It has to be a white area. But that doesn't feel right. That's too far off center to start there. I'm going to start with the sky. Okay, now I want to zoom you guys in a little bit, if I can. Let's see. Hi, Edward. It was a little bit fast. Thanks for noticing. Okay, I think that'll work. So I'm mixing up now on a palette. So for the first time all day, I'm actually mixing paint like a traditional oil painter. I don't use a palette knife. I mix with brushes, especially since I paint with 2 of them. So I've got titanium white. Again, for what it's worth, my titanium white is always Alkyd, fast dry titanium. So I don't have to worry about waiting forever for any impasto to dry. Impasto is thick paint. We like thick paint. Seeing thick paint on oil paintings. But if you use regular titanium white, it could take 2 months for it to dry. Okay. Still a little too dark. I'm going to start with the sky. And I'm looking over to my right, again, not for play of light, not for shadows, but for architectural details. Okay, am I in the, yeah, I am. Now, this is one thing that I'm doing right now is very typical of this final edit layer. And that is that I am literally drawing for the last time, drawing, rendering, executing, outlining, in this case, the top of this particular building. Okay, that's what I mean by final edit. These marks right here are determining exactly where these buildings are going to go. All the marks that I've made up to this point are suggestive, approximate, and we're done very quickly. Now I get to decide which ones stay, which ones go. And I think you can see this. I'm trying to look at your monitor there. It's right here. Yeah. You can see this orange. What's that orange doing in the sky? That's left over from the fuzz layer when I just went like that with orange on my brushes and my brush flew up there in the sky. I will cover up some of that, but I'm leaving some of it, definitely leaving some of it exposed, uncorrected. Why? Because it looks cool. That's the answer to every question, right? I already mentioned that. Because I think it looks cool. There are a number of other answers, factors I could give. I know that the human eye likes to see little bits of the object that is spilled over into the background. That's exactly what happened. The object is the building, background is the sky. We see little bits of the object that is spilled over. We like to see that. Why? Because that's in actuality, that's literally how we see the world. Thank you, Claude Monet and the Impressionists who taught us that trick about we don't see the world like the way a camera does. Our eyes are flitting, and everything in our field of vision is not only flitting but interposing. There's a word, interposing. So the blue has interposed into the brown of the buildings, and the brown, or orange in this case, of the buildings has interposed itself into the blue of the sky. It's not what a fussy person would call realistic. In fact, a really fussy adult would say, that's not very realistic. What's that supposed to be? Okay? And there are some people that have that kind of problem with visual stuff. I am not painting for those people. They are not going to like my artwork. And that's all right. They don't care much for much artwork. What is good artwork to those kind of people is what looks like a photograph. And that's all right. And there's lots of people doing photographic artwork to satisfy people like that. But I'm not, I don't have to do that. Another thing that you see me doing right now that is very typical for me in the final edit is that I tend to focus on boundaries. Okay, in this case, it's a good example because I'm focusing on the boundary of the sky. The further I get from the buildings, the less carefully I will paint. The less I'll paint, the less paint I'll put down. But I use in this case the light blue, opaque light blue paint to give definition to the edges of those buildings. But I do not need to carry this degree of coverage, this degree of opacity, this degree of detail up to the sky, because our eye just doesn't need it. Once I've painted the boundary, the edge of these buildings, our eye finishes the rest. I'm doing up here now, again, very typical for me, just the hint of clouds, or hint of blue sky between clouds actually, and then the underpainting that I let show through here just becomes nice abstract clouds. I don't want to paint clouds. I can paint clouds. I love skies. I love realistic skies. Therefore, it's a real danger for me to accidentally start, if you will, tongue painting clouds. Start painting them realistically. Big mistake. Very easy for me to do because I pay a lot of attention to clouds. I know how to paint them realistically. That's not my goal. I want to put sort of a mess on the canvas that the viewer's mind turns into clouds. I'm not painting or rendering clouds. You're going to make clouds in your brain with the scant information that I give you. And in so doing, if you finish the picture in your brain, in your mind, if you're the one who finishes, turns this, for instance, into clouds, then you experience a zap, you experience a zap of aesthetic pleasure. And I contend that is one of the highest aesthetic pleasures that a human being can experience from a piece of artwork, is not looking at a finished painting and saying, wow, look how much work the artist did. But instead looking at a, so to speak, unfinished painting, and your brain goes, golly, those look like clouds. But they don't look like clouds, they just look like brush strokes. Man, I remember so well when I was an art student and up in Michigan, and we went to the Art Institute of Detroit. We went to Chicago, Art Institute of Chicago, but there's a museum, and I'm forgetting the name, but the art museum in Detroit, and there was a Frans Hals, Dutch, 1600 something, I think, Dutch master. And it may have been the Laughing Cat, I'm not sure, but it may have been that one, but it was one very much like it, if it wasn't that one. And for some reason, that was the day, that was the painting of the day for me. When I saw this painting of Frans Hals, and it, Dutch realism, the Laughing Cavalier is wearing lace on his sleeve, around his neck, all kinds of like pearl buttons and all kinds of stuff. From 10 feet away, it looked like a photograph of lace. From 2 feet away, it looked like a hodgepodge of... Hey gang, sorry, my YouTube turned off without announcement. So I don't know how long I've been talking to myself. I was talking about seeing a Frans Hals painting when I was a student. I saw it in Detroit, Michigan. And from 10 feet, the lace, the fabric on this Laughing Cavalier looked like a photograph. And from 2 feet, it looked like a messy hodgepodge of brush strokes. So that's all I'm going to say about that. My app turned itself off somewhere in the middle of that discussion. I'm going to let it go at that. Good painting, is my point was, is when the viewer's mind finishes the picture. And that's what is one of the biggest... Oh, I've got a mistake here. Look at this. Can you see this? Yeah. These fronds, these branches are soldiers in a row. Dang, that's easy to do. But glad I caught it, so I'll cut one of these soldiers down short, and now it works. I might talk about sky holes later, if I come back and do some in here. Can I get you guys in closer here? Maybe I can. The danger with me moving you to one part of the canvas is then I proceed from there and forget to move you back. Forgive me while I fix your gooseneck. There, is that going to be in focus? Okay, I guess I'll talk about sky holes. I've given this lecture many times before here on this channel and in person. They ought to be called tree holes, but that's another subject. I won't go into that right at the moment. The key concept, whatever color they are, has to match this color. If it doesn't read like a bit of sky showing through. I'm not going to go into why I don't paint the sky and then just paint the tree on top of it. I already mentioned that real briefly in answer to someone's question earlier today. I'm just going to assume that if you're an artist, you're a painter, you already know you want to do sky holes. How to do them? How do you do them? First of all, match the color. I say that so many times, and yet then students don't do it. I don't know what to say. Pay attention to what I'm saying. It's got to be the same color. The blue that you put on top of the tree has to be the same blue that's over here beside the tree. Okay? And of course, it's hard to do sky holes because you're trying to paint a tree in the negative. Trees are hard enough to paint in the positive, let alone painting trees by not painting the tree, but by painting the sky. I'm going to move over to this tree. Okay. Secondly, this is in specific. Should sky holes be soft edged? Should they have soft edges or hard edges? The real answer is both, hard and soft. More leaning, now listen to my whole paragraph here, leaning a little more toward soft more than hard. But, big but coming up here. So leaning towards soft rather than hard, but because of a lack of brushmanship, skill with the brush, I don't believe I've ever seen a student that ever did their sky holes hard enough. So just a smear of blue doth not a sky hole make. Let me use Old English to really make the point. A smear of blue does not get the job done. It's got to be more like a dab of blue. So anyway, hard edges and soft edges, but if you're a student, you better learn how to do hard edges first and then soften up. Because almost every student I've ever seen do sky holes, they did them too soft. Too soft. Okay. I'm going to get finished with the sky here very soon. Again, I can look over at the subject matter for architectural elements and architectural details, but I cannot look at it for light and shadow. For that, I have to look at my photograph. It's down here to my left. I will come back and in a while, late in the painting probably, and do a little bit more in the sky, but I think I'm going to call that good enough for now. So where to start the final area, my first answer was today with the sky. Now, where to go from there? It's got to be in these buildings somewhere. So, oh, by the way, I don't, if you were watching me earlier, I said that only 10 to 15% of this canvas is going to get opaque paint on it. My wording is precise there, opaque. All of this blue that I just did up there, none of that is opaque. Very little, a little bit of opaque maybe there, tiny bit there. Almost all of it is translucent. That does not count against the 15%. Okay, that's important. This final edit, I call it light opaque highlights, but if I'm speaking more precisely, it's actually very often light translucent highlights. Okay, I'm just going to start here with one of the buildings that I think deserves high attention, and I'm going to finish it and then maybe just begin crawling across. So that's a dangerous way to paint, by the way, crawling. Finish one spot and then moving. You can do it. I'm going to do some of that, I think, right here, but you have to be very careful. It'd be wiser to do some here, then here, then here, then here, then here. Paint the whole thing. So we'll see. I can start with this building. Again, I'm looking over to my right. It's not quite bright enough. A little bit lighter. It's just a mess of colors here. It's a very pale beige. A little detail on this building that I noticed before. In fact, I can hardly see it with the naked eye. My phone here actually sees it better than I did, so I just made a slight change. And then picked up the pencil to accentuate or define the change that I just made. Okay, couple comments about, I'm painting, if you will, like a traditional oil painter. That is, I'm using opaque colors. That's traditional. Most of my fellow artists, children of the 20th century, not the 21st, children of the 20th century, paint quite opaquely. Paint with predominantly opaque colors. So now that I'm painting in an opaque manner, like some perhaps, let me give you just a couple instructions, qualifications, details about painting in this manner, painting opaque. One thing I would like you to, of course, notice how I'm holding the brushes. Most of the time, I never hold a brush like this, or even like this, until I'm signing my signature. We paint, typically, with the blade of the brush, the side of the brush. And most of my brushes are filberts, by the way. A few rounds, a few flats, mostly filberts. So first of all, notice how I hold the brush. Notice also that I paint with two hands. I started painting with two hands about 10 or 12 years ago. And I'm still very much right-handed, although my left hand has gained dexterity at everything. When I play catch with my grandson, now I'll often catch and throw with my left hand instead of my right hand, just for fun, just because I can. So I've gained, as I say, dexterity in my left hand has in every way by forcing it to paint. I was going to say one of the ironies is that my left hand actually makes vertical marks better than my right hand does. That is really weird. That is just strange. Okay, I think before I leave this building, I am going to mix up a slightly darker color. Yeah. For the shady side, for the shadow side of this building. Okay, so back to brushmanship. Couple things I'd like you to notice. Already, how to hold a brush. Number two, almost every stroke that I put down is a one stroke. Now, some of you are familiar with that kind of artsy craftsy, you know, housewife on the kitchen table. Forgive me for being whatever that was. I don't know if that's sexist. Hope not. But that's who did this thing called one stroke. You can just Google it. You can find one stroke. It's a one stroke painting. One good thing about that one stroke stuff is, if people were paying attention and trying to do it, they were actually becoming better painters, because most students, left to their own devices, they do brushy. They put paint down on the canvas, and then they feel like they have to move it around. So they do move it around. Very bad habit. Very bad habit. Just put it down and leave it. So that's the other thing. Second thing I'd like you to notice about the way that I'm painting. Number one, hold the brush. Number two, single stroke. While I'm at it, then, this is not how to brush. This is not brushmanship, but let me go ahead and give you maybe the next. When you're in the opaque mode, you're painting again like I am now. Some of you, your whole entire painting is in the opaque mode. If so, then this applies to you doing the whole thing. But for me, the opaque is only the last layer. Once you get to the opaque mode, then here's a very important principle. It's almost always a good idea, and there are not that many things in painting that you can say almost always, but it's almost always a good idea, after having put down a color, to come back and hit that color, a color slightly lighter than that, slightly lighter, brighter, whiter, slightly lighter than what you just put down, and come back and just touch on top of what you just put down, here and there and here. It almost doesn't matter where you put these lighter strokes. That's not the point. It's not where you put them. You can just put them anywhere on top of what's already there. So now, like this little square of a building, let me zoom in here, try, even though I've got a very imprecise easel. There, is it gonna focus? Come on. Will you do it? Focus? Okay, I think it's focused now. So this is what I just finished painting. First, I did it with about a number 2 value, a tan color. Then I with the number 1 value, almost white, and just touched a little bits of it here and there. Now that last stroke was not on, that didn't count, that was up in the sky, but I just did it because all of a sudden I realized it would look good. Okay, now let me proceed. So I did this area down here. The orange are the windows that I just let the orange show through. So I've got a slightly lighter color one way I try to describe this, I changed it then from what I had on there a minute paint. What I have on there now is, I'm trying to get the focus right. You like my dirty fingers? What I have in there now is a painting. Now I don't usually do this, introduce a pencil in after the very last layer, but I think that looks better. Okay, now this side of the building over here, while I'm cheating and doing pencils, I'm going to do a little bit more. I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm mixing. You see, this is a darker paint than this, but now I'm going to mix up a slightly lighter version of this darker side, and just hit little bits of it here and there on top of what's already there. So it changes it, in a sense, from a color of paint to a painting. There's a shimmer and a glitter there that wasn't there just a minute ago, and I'm afraid that's out of focus. So let me just go back there. There we go. Next, I'm going to go over here to this building because that is one of the lightest, brightest, whitest buildings in this scene. Let me look at my photograph, make sure. It's not quite as white in my photograph as it is. No, but I'm going to paint it white. Sun going down, getting cooler out here. Not quite complaining. I'd still rather be out here. I am good and hungry though. I'd rather be out painting than in the best hospital in America. Old joke, old bad joke. I want this building to be a fairly white, but even so, that first stroke that I put down was far from opaque. I'm letting the canvas, the roughness of the canvas show through so that the underpainting is showing through. It's not, and the paint on my brush is not a pure white, of course. It's very close to it. It's a number 1 value, but it's not a 0. 0 is right out of the tube titanium. This is a number 1. Which raises a question, can I do that little trick that I just talked about over here, where I mix up a color slightly? Because if it's a number 1 value, that essentially means that I can't mix up a color any lighter than what I've got. If I go any lighter than this, is pure titanium. The answer is no, I cannot mix up a lighter color. But can I do the same trick? The answer is yes. Because the paint that I'm applying right now is fairly thin. You can't see it, but I'm letting the brush drag across the canvas, and the little holes in the canvas are showing through. So that means I don't have to mix up a lighter version of this to achieve that little trick that is over here. I'll show you in just a minute what I'm going to do, because I can't mix up a lighter color unless it's pure titanium white. That's usually inadvisable to put pure titanium white on your canvas. Okay, the answer is, after I'm mixing up, is just come and here and there dab a little heavier. Now I'm going to do a little trick here. Hope I do it right. You can do it twice. There. If I want that building to look like it's really glistering with bright sunlight on it, then I smear it and then come back, and where my thumb lifted paint off the building, I'm putting it back on. So now I have a little, can you see that? I'm going to zoom in for just a minute. Let's see if I can get that pointed in the right direction. Okay, it's going to focus. I think so. I think I can zoom in even more. Hang on. Whoa. There we go. Okay, so now you can see I just smeared it with my thumb, and then came back and touched up the part that I smeared. There's some kind of fancy antenna or something that's sticking up above this building. All right, let's back up now. So I've got this very, very light stuff on my brushes. Let me look around for, yes, right there. Let me look around for other stuff. Oh yes, this right here. This part of this building. So there are a number of buildings here that are very pale, slight yellow brick. I'm not sure that's even that word, yellows, but a very pale brick, and with the sun hitting them, like these two buildings, they're very light colored. But then there are a few buildings that actually are white, like this one and the top of that. So that's what, and the top of this over here. So at the moment, since I've got this very, very, very light stuff on my brushes, so I don't have to remix and remix my paints over and over and over again. Let's go ahead and there's a big satellite dish on top of that Sheraton hotel. Oh yes. There's I don't know what it is. There's a white line top of it. Looks like just the top of the building that we can barely see right down there. Brushmanship. Very, very rarely. Now, when I look over there, actually there is some kind of power line or one telephone pole or something in front of that white line. But very rarely would I take a brush like this and go and make a solid white line. Man, this is just craftsmanship, skill, brushmanship. You make a dot, you make a little bit of a line, then leave a break, and then come back and finish it. Maybe even make 2 breaks, which is what I did here. I actually made 3 breaks, 1, 2, 3 breaks in that line. And you might say, well, that's a bit too much. Okay, so I'm gonna diminish one of them. Now it's just 2 breaks. But that's just something that, man, it's hard to train, hard to teach that kind of intuitive stuff. I'm describing it to you now, hoping it will help some. But it's related to the subject of interesting marks. Let's go over now to the top of the Marriott. And again, look at my in my photograph that doesn't even show up, so I'm on my own there. And by the way, this is why we shouldn't call them sky holes. Because right now I'm painting a building behind the tree. Same concept, same idea, but it's not sky, it's building. So they should be called tree holes. But alas, I was not invited to the committee meeting where they decided what to call these things. So my opinion was not asked. So they're called sky holes. They should be called tree holes. I'm sensitive to that because so much of what I paint is architectural, and I paint buildings behind trees so often. And I actually do literally remember when I began oil painting, which was approximately the age of 45. Now that's misleading, by the way. Don't. You started painting at 45? No. I mean, I guess if I want to impress you, make you think something. No, full-time professional artist for decades, literally decades, before I started oil painting. What I mean is I've done every other kind of painting. I do remember hearing the term sky holes. And the very first time I heard it, think, that's kind of dumb. What if it's a mountain behind the tree? Then it's not a sky hole, it's a mountain hole. Etc., etc. That's enough. That's enough of that. And that's a little too much detail, so just a little flick of the finger takes care of that pretty much. So I mentioned earlier this afternoon, I said this final layer, even though it only covers roughly 10 to 15% of the canvas, will have opaque paint on it. This last layer takes longer than, it takes as long pretty much as all the other layers put together. And if you're watching me now, you're beginning to see why. little tiny bits of paint, little spots, but very carefully placed. When I teach a painting class, I very often will say, I'll announce to the students, okay, so when I'm teaching my technique in particular, I will say, can we get this in focus? Yeah, there we go. I know it focuses on my arm or my sleeve, doesn't it, while I'm up there. I'll say to the students, okay, during the first half of this class, my challenge to you is try to be as messy as I am. And very few of them can bring themselves to be as messy as I am. That's all right. They're, you know, in a class, everybody's off balance. They're learning new stuff. And then in the second half of the class, I say, now we're going to switch roles. And I beg of you, as much as possible, try to paint as neatly as I do. And very few of them can do that either. So most students are not messy enough to match my messiness, and they're not neat enough when I move, like now, to the neat, careful phase. And again, if somebody only watched me in my first 13 layers, I think this is my 15th layer here today. If you only watched the first 12, you would have a completely wrong impression about the way I paint. Okay, I'm tired of doing that white stuff, so I've already thankfully got some nice orange here on my brushes. There's a bunch of buildings in here that have orange brick with sunlight hitting them. And let's start doing some of those. Man, I wish I could zoom you in. I'm gonna try. It's kind of dangerous. Let's see if I can, because I really would like you to see. Okay, will that get in focus? It's kind of thinking about it, isn't it? Come on. Okay. So this front of this building is bathed in sunlight. In reality, and in my photograph, it's bathed in sunlight. And all the layers that I've done up to this point have created a hodgepodge of red, yellow, green, burgundy, orange, a whole mess of colors, if you will. But I want it to look like what is traditionally called a red brick building, more like orange brick, actually. I want it to look like an orange brick building with sun on it. But it would be a terrible loss to just take this paint that's on my brushes right here and just plaster it on the face of this building. Why would it be a terrible loss? Because there's all kinds of interesting stuff happening on the face of this building. I'm mixing up a darker orange right now. And it would be a disaster to cover up all the interestingness. Can I use that word? Invent a word? It would be a disaster to cover up all the interestingness with boringness. Making up words left and right. So as I'm letting the underpainting peek through here and there and here and there, I want it to look like a flat building, but I don't want to paint it flat. I want as much of the underpainting to peek through as possible. Now, I'm fairly happy with that. The only problem is, maybe not the only problem, but the main problem that I see is that my windows are too big. And again, that's a mistake that I can live with, because when I hang up this painting, I won't put a photograph next to it and ask people to give me a grade, right? So it's not because it's not realistic, but it's bothering me a little bit that the windows look too big for the building. So I'm just going to shrink them all up a little bit using a palette knife, as you see, which gives me a nice variation in texture, which is pleasant. There we go. I'm getting closer now. I'm liking better. I'm liking the way that's looking better now. Okay, now I'm going to do, again, that trick that I mentioned so often. Will it go in focus? There we go. Okay, I'm going to do that trick, even though there's already a couple different shades of orange. I did the light orange first and the dark orange second, which is a violation of a rule. The rule is lights first, darks last. But I'm going to come back, and I'm mixing up now a slightly lighter shade of that orange, and touching just here and there and here and there on this building. It's a little bit too busy up there, a little bit too much underpainting showing through, I think. So it's a very delicate balance. I want this to look like a flat side of a building, right? But I don't want it to look like flat paint. I want there to be interest. So right now I'm actually cutting down I'm covering up more than I had done earlier because it was just a little too busy. That is good. I have now a completely different problem with it. Let me back you up so you can see it in perspective a little bit more. And that is that the dark windows in this building are just too dark. They're screaming out loud to the viewer. Hey man, look at me, look at me, look at me. We should be looking at them, but it shouldn't be yelling at us. So there's too much contrast going there. So I'm actually going to add a tiny light to diminish the contrast here. Going to add warm gray, I guess, if you were trying to come up with a name. And by the way, human beings, we like seeing light paint on top of dark paint. So right now, I just about can't go wrong. As long as what I'm putting on these windows is slightly lighter than what's already there, then I'm okay. Now, and it just so happens that the shades are pulled in the upstairs, are down in the top story of this building. And I'm going to go ahead and reflect that reality by painting these windows quite light. So it gives me a nice little bit of variety. The windows aren't all the same color. And ironically or serendipitously, it's actually a more accurate rendering of that building. And then with this gray that I just used, I can do the top of the building. Okay, boy, I sure spent a lot of time just on that little detail, didn't I? That's good enough. I have gray on my brushes right now, so I thought, well, there's a whole bunch of gray on this. This shape right here is called the Shimmer Wall. Raleigh is very proud of its convention center, as it should be. Beautiful convention center. And this is one side of it. It's got what is called the Shimmer Wall. Hundreds of thousands of little round pieces of metal, like scales, hanging from a hook, a wire. And so as the wind goes across this wall, it shimmers in waves. It's actually quite fun, quite attractive. They're definitely a architectural focal point of our skyline, which is, of course, what they had in mind when they did it. Again, remember what I said just a few minutes ago? The line that I'm rendering right now. Hey, maybe I can, let me try to point you at what I'm, so you can see it. Let me turn the camera around. Let's see how zoomy I can zoom in here. Oh yeah, sure, easily. Ah! Oh, sorry. My phone does that. I'm not making it do that. It does it on its own, sorry. Okay, there we go. So you see, can I point to it? Yeah, it's that line, two light lines there, right? So in reality, as you can see, that's an unbroken line across the top of that building, right? I want you to register. In reality, it's an unbroken line right across the top of that building. It would be a huge mistake to paint it as an unbroken line. It would look stiff, contrived, painted, stuck on, boring. All of these words are appropriate words for how it would look if I just took my brush and went, which is, forgive me, that is what most students would do. So I've got it broken up in different ways and to different degrees. Of course, as you saw, I used a palette knife to render some of it. Now that's very sophisticated. That's a very sophisticated painting lesson. And if you're a beginner, you could easily say, why? What do you mean? Why? I don't think that looks good, and stuff like that. You're welcome to be wrong. There are two white lines along the top. I'm going to paint them both parallel. There's a little renegade dab swoosh of orange paint right there. It doesn't mean anything. It's orange that escaped from this building up here and spilled down into this building. Not only am I not going to wipe it out, eliminate it in the final edit, I'm actually accentuating it by painting around it. Again, if you're a beginner, what I'm talking about now is not painting 101 by a long shot. That is very sophisticated philosophy. I could go on for hours. I won't. If you watch me, I'll do it often enough. I could go on for hours as to why that kind of thing is appropriate. It's mostly related to the way our eyes perceive reality and what we like about paintings. We don't like, mostly, for paintings to be finished. We like to finish them in our brain, in our mind. And that's what gives us a great degree of, highest degree of pleasure from looking at a painting, is the part that we finish. And even that is a fairly high or sophisticated, leaning toward even philosophical view of painting. So if you're a beginner, I don't really expect you to get that. You can file it away till you're ready to process it. If you're a beginner, especially if you're young, I think one of your primary tasks at this stage of your career and life as an artist is to learn how to paint stuff that looks like stuff. Nail down realism. You can't advance to real good impressionistic stuff until you really have realism, in my humble opinion, which ain't so humble, until you have realism securely under your belt. Till you can do realism, you can't do good impressionism. Yeah, I'll stand by that. I will stand by that. And as you know, if you hang around with artists very much, you probably know that a lot of artists do impressionistic painting simply because they're unable, they don't have the chops to do realistic painting. And that's okay. I mean, the important thing is, are they having fun? But for those of us who want to go beyond just having fun and create works of art that move people, that's the trajectory. So if you're young, some of what I'm saying is beyond. You shouldn't even be messing with this. What you should be doing is learning how to paint stuff that looks like stuff. That certainly is my journey. Realism for decades. Transrealism. Ooh, that's a good word. I've never used that before. That's not a bad description. That is realism. The technique, the word that I have used for my painting, I got from David Leffel, as he described his. He calls it abstract realism, and that is a good, I think, a good description of this kind of painting. What it means is it's clearly representational. I mean, look, I'm spending hours trying to render what this city in front of me looks like, right? But in spite of all those hours, it's not primarily. My painting is not primarily about these buildings. Well, what is my painting about then, you ask, right? My painting is about color, well, texture, line, shape, value, color, rhythm, intensity, balance, contrast. Get the point? Okay. And this broadcast is getting on rather long, so this is probably, and it's getting for real chilly out here now. So this is probably a good place for me to quit. I really do like finishing a painting on location, but that would take me another 3 hours, 2.5 hours. I'm coming up on 4 hours into the painting, and I think time-wise, I'm about 80% finished. To just give you some idea, that's where I think I'm at. There's a real beautiful scene over there to my right now. I'll show you again, but it's not the scene that I'm painting. Just want to show you beautiful sunset behind us. Isn't that pretty? Yeah. Nice sun glistering on that building on the right there. That's fun. Try to capture that. But I might take a picture of it. That is certainly what I'm painting. Nice shot of my coat, I know. Okay, I've been going on for a long time. I appreciate your company, appreciate your comments. Let's see if I missed any chats. I don't think I got Edward's chats. Thank you, Edward. Appreciate it. Are you from Brazil, Edward? Forgive me, I forget. Thanks for your comments. Yeah, I've been going an hour and 5 minutes. That's a long time. I'm going to continue this. A very important principle is more detail and hard edges here in the middle, getting softer and softer the further I get out. And this is a good time to remind myself. It's real easy for a painting to have too many hard edges. Virtually impossible for a painting to have too many soft edges. Very easy. So I need to be careful not to just, put my head down and plow forward and just do edge, hard edge, draw, render, building. No, that would be a disaster. So I need to pick and choose which buildings. I've already picked that one, and that one. Those four are, thank you. Did you? Yeah, good. Thank you. Sweet. So I have to be very careful. Of course, most of my hard edges will be concentrated right in here. as I said. But I need to be careful not to just go crazy. Thing with color, you know, the more intense colors. I'll get some grass green down here a little bit, not much. It's very close to where I want it. I'll probably come up here, I mentioned a while ago, I'll probably come up here and do a little bit, tiny bit, a little more intense blue. Don't know where yet. That'll come later. Just a tiny bit. The sky is very close to the way I want it right now. This building needs a lot of work. It always needs a lot of work. What I mean, this is the most difficult building for some reason to render. So I'll do that. Now I'm just talking to myself. Thanks you guys for watching. I hope it's been entertaining and informational or informative. And tomorrow, by the way, I won't finish this tomorrow. Tomorrow I go and do a wedding at the beach in North Carolina. Get up early Sunday morning and come back and do another wedding in Chapel Hill. So I'm excited about that. Good weekend. And then I've got a lot of projects on my plate besides this, another commission, some calligraphy, and some book illustrations. So I hope to be broadcasting more in the coming week than I've been doing the last couple of weeks. And I hope you join me. Thanks guys for watching. Bye-bye.